Hi, students. In this particular area today, on phase two, I want to go over some of the objectives I'm going to be covering today. And the learning objectives in section 12 on culture are to recognize the three dimensions of culture, and to which I may have already touched on in the overview, the previous recording, and describe the iceberg approach to organizational culture, competing values framework of organizational culture, and look at some of the subcultures as well. So, in your book, if you're following along, we want to recognize the three dimensions of culture. And what culture really does is it underlies people's values from beginning to end and puts them together where they can agree to disagree with one another, but also they can integrate with one another in a very good way. Organizational culture is important. Why? Because it helps us determine behaviors. So look at figure 12.1 in your book. And this figure goes over the important aspects of culture. So it talks about the dimensions of, which there are four of them, the dimensions of organizational culture, competing values, framework, and subcultures, national versus organizational culture, and transmitting culture and links to strategy. Cultures, as your book states, do emerge over time. And they do trace back to the organization's origins. And for example, the book uses the technology company Hewlett Packard. And it talks how David Packard and Tom Hewlett came together pretty much about 100 years ago and founded the company in a garage, which, as you know, you may have probably known that many organizations started in a garage culture. And the organizational culture reflects the patterns of shared beliefs between these two individuals. So the question is, as the company continued to grow and grow and grow from that garage environment, did the culture of Hewlett Packard change from the time they started working in their garages? And your book states that culture shapes how individuals perceive, think, and feel, but it also creates the rituals, myths, and stories that go along with the culture. So clearly, you can see here there's a differentiation between the skill set, all right, and the individuals who are forming the culture in a certain way. The culture talks about the methodologies of doing things. If you look at figure 12.2 in your book, the Shines model, SCHEIN apostrophe S, for those of you that are looking at your slides, there's a model of culture that emerged at the intersection of anthropology and psychology. And you could see in 12.2, okay, You look at the basic assumptions of culture, the deeper assumptions, which are the views of the world and how it works, and assumptions about self and competitors' emotions. Then, as you move up that pyramid, you go to espoused values. That is a statement of values. States here they're easy to see, but not always reflective of real cultures. Why? Because espoused values go to individual values and then they're how they are communicated between individuals. And if you really want to look at it, it's a lot about beliefs. And then you have the artifacts. That's the day-to-day behaviors. Easy to see, but difficult to determine cultures. What is the environment around you? What are the values that surround that environment? So we build assumptions, and assumptions include beliefs about, and I already talked about this, but reality. How can we rationalize a reality from someone's perception? And different values will reflect the validity of the reality. So then we talk about the nature of time, and that focuses on attention to short-term events or long-term time frame. Then space. The world is vast and diverse, are small and similar. How do we look at the world? How do assumptions on how we look at the organization shape the values of the organization by using everyone else's value? And then you have human nature. Well, what is human nature? People are naturally motivated or need incentives to work hard. It goes back to what we already studied, McGregor's theory X and theory Y. And then we have the iceberg metaphor, the nature of culture and organizations being above the waterline. So what does it state? An iceberg is a small body of ice or a large body of ice, many times larger than the eyes meet. But in comparison to the rest of the world, it's very small. So do we have people that micromanage or people that look at the big picture? All of these values come together in an organization. Policies, formal structures, espouse values, and work procedures. The culture, as the cultural iceberg metaphor illustrates, all of the things that are going on above the waterline. And where are we on that iceberg? What occurs? So if you look at figure 12-3, looking at the iceberg model, you have the visible organization and the hidden organization. The visible talks about organizational structure, reporting relationships, titles and position descriptions. Yeah, it's the formal hierarchy that everybody follows, rules and procedures, and systems and technology. Now, let's go to the hidden organization. That's emergent power and influence. What do our values do to emerge the culture, singularly, collectively, to collect group norms? Now we have trust, perceptions of risk, psychological safety, emotions, perceptions, and desires. So we look at the purpose of culture. Cultures, national, organizational, and international, that I've touched on already. They establish limits of acceptable behavior. and what is legitimate and illegitimate in a culture. Culture sets the ground rules. How far will we go? And how does the hierarchy influence the culture to go a certain way? So, a lot of times, culture can support organizational strategy and effectiveness, but it also, if we have low morale with poor leadership, can bring the culture down. Okay, so this is all I'm going to cover here for phase 2 of today's lecture.